Hi, everyone. I'm Shartia Brantley, Deputy New York Bureau Chief and Bloomberg Live Senior Editor. I am delighted to discuss creating a more equitable workplace at Levi Strauss Co. with Chip Bergh, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Elizabeth A. Morrison, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. Welcome, Chip and Elizabeth.
Thank you for having us, Shartia.
Oh, great to have you. We have a lot to get into, so let's just dive right in. Chip, we recently commemorated the one-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. His killing, along with the killings of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, in the midst of a global deadly pandemic, was almost too much to bear and sparked global protests and rallying cries for equality and justice, as well as a reckoning on race. How have you been impacted both personally and as a leader?
Well, as you said, it was really a moment of racial reckoning in this country. I also had my own personal reckoning, I guess, as a leader, because one of the things that we did was we took a very quick look internally at where we stood from a racial diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. And the bottom line was we weren't where we needed to be. And I needed to kind of build my humility muscle and my empathy muscle. I publicly declared that I failed as a leader in this particular area. I have a lot to be proud of over 10 years, turning the company around, taking the company public. But I failed as a leader in not building an organization that was as diverse as it needed to be and a culture that was as inclusive as it needed to be. And I am personally committed to making a difference. You know, at the time of George Floyd's murder, I said something to the effect of, we all need to do something to end structural racism in this country. Failing to act makes us complicit. And I'm in a position as a leader to make a difference in my company and make a difference here. And I firmly believe that this is not just a moral imperative, it's a business imperative. We will be a better company when we are more diverse and more inclusive.
Well, that brings us to Elizabeth. That's one of the changes that you made in 2020 following the just historic year that we had last year. Elizabeth, you joined the company during the fourth quarter of 2020. What has surprised you most on your listening tour, and what was one of the first things you did in this role?
Thank you again for having both of us to talk about this. And one of the first things that I did, and that honestly the company did for me, was set me up for success by declaring that DE&I was going to be one of our top business priorities for the year. There was high visibility from the very beginning. The first week I was on our global town halls that Chip does, Chips and Beer, being introduced to all of the employees, and again, having us double down on our commitment and what the action is going to be behind that. What I've heard from employees, I think I was surprised at the level of passion and the hunger for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that, marginalized employees, that's something that they've articulated and wanted for so long, but across the board, from leaders down to our retail distribution centers and plants, the desire and the appetite from employees, managers, it's incredible. So people really are hungry for that knowledge and the how. Strategic diversity, equity, and inclusion. How does it operate? How do we do it? How do we solve these challenges that we're facing?
Mm-hmm. And Chip, what were some of the reactions you received from your global leadership team as you had this personal reckoning and admission that more can be done?
Well, one of the things that we did pretty early on was we invited our Black employee resource group to come talk to us as a team. And this is where, the empathy building really came into play. Just hearing from them what they live day to day, both on the outside, living and working in the Bay Area, but also on the inside, hearing about the microaggressions that happen inside the company and the challenges that they have, hearing how difficult it is to look up the hierarchy and not see somebody like you in a position of higher authority and power. And it was, listening to some of their stories, honestly, was very, very gut wrenching. I mean, that is not the kind of company that I want to be a part of. And I'm in a place where I can make that kind of change and drive that kind of change to create a more inclusive. At the end of the day, this is about company culture, but it's also about business performance. And we're just not living up to the full potential of the company when we've got that kind of a culture inside, and when we're not as diverse and representative of the consumers that we're serving in this country and around the world. And so it really was very, very important for all of us on the leadership team to hear the experiences of the individuals inside the company and what they deal with day to day. And that's what led us to making diversity, equity, and inclusion a top strategic priority. Every year I talk about our top priorities with the entire organization, and this is one of them. And it's not going to be a one and done type of thing. It's not like at the end of this year we're going to say we're done and we can move on. I think this is going to be a long-term commitment to to really addressing the culture of the company.
I definitely want to talk about senior leadership representation and boosting those numbers. But Elizabeth, Chip was talking about talking to our colleagues. One debate I had with a friend, how or should Black employees and other underrepresented groups discuss our experience and trauma to senior leadership?
Yeah, and quite honestly, there's a fine line. So we absolutely want to create a safe space for employees to express themselves, and it's important that people understand that culture isn't experienced the same by everyone. But also, we have to walk a line, because when people share their stories, they can be triggered, and it can be them reliving pain over and over again. So how much and how vulnerable we ask people to be in a public space around highly personal and sometimes hurtful experiences, we really do have to balance that. One of the things that we've done is we are having racial healing sessions with professional mental health experts, and we have both sessions that are closed to marginalized employees. Right now, we have them with our Black employees and also with our Asian employees because of the anti-Asian sentiment that's been happening. And then we have sessions with those same practitioners for all employees. And so there's more of a controlled environment. There's a safe space for people who are experiencing similar trauma to kind of bond and share pain, but also go on a journey of healing. And then there's an open session. And that is really helping employees that really feel as though they need that safe space, and also us to get a better understanding of what those experiences are like, and then shape our programs, plans, strategies around that so that we're meeting the moment.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of meeting the moment, our Gen Z and our younger millennials, they want change yesterday. So, Chip, how are you and Elizabeth and the entire global leadership team balancing long-term strategic planning with quick fixes, easy victories to show everyone that you're engaged and you're working, getting the work done?
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of the short-term goals that we've had and what we've put into place, and Elizabeth can talk a little bit about the longer-term strategic plan and the maturation process, I guess, of really driving this over time, because we are committed to this to the long term. And some of this change probably will take a little bit of time. And in fact, I would say I'm incredibly impatient, because I really have embraced this as this has got to be part of my legacy of the company, not just turning it around and taking it public, but really building a diverse organization that is living up to its full potential from a culture standpoint. So we made a number of commitments after George Floyd's murder. I mean, one of the very first things we did was we were transparent with our data. And we broke it down, by ethnic diversity, racial diversity, if you will, at all levels across the United States. And we also broke it down by retail and distribution centers. And the hard, ugly truth of the numbers was, when we looked at our corporate headquarters, we are far below representation, particularly with Black leaders inside the company. And that was, the humble pie moment for me, because we went public with that. And we committed to make real progress. We committed that we were going to be transparent on an annual basis, and we updated it back early this year, early in the calendar year. When we updated the demographic data, we also provided transparency on pay equity data, which we committed that we would start doing as well. And the good news there is that there was no pay equity discrepancy by race. We made commitments around hiring some key leaders. Elizabeth is one of them. We were very quick to follow through there. And I have to say, I am blessed with having a great leader here. And she is a terrific partner. This is not her job. It's my job. And she helps me really drive it in so many ways. It's got to be driven from the top from me, but she's an incredible resource for us and has really landed great. We've added a new member to our board of directors, Elliot Rogers, who's the chief information officer at Ulta. He's got a lot of retail experience. He earns a seat at our board because of his experience. It's great that he happens to be also a Black leader. And I really make that point emphatically because he is a terrific board member and very, very experienced and really rounds out our board. And then, we've put into place, we've declared this a strategic priority, but we review our progress with the board of directors. And we've actually included a component of executive compensation tied directly to the progress that we make on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and therefore have periodic reviews with the board of directors on our progress. And in fact, Elizabeth is presenting at our upcoming board meeting later this month. So, she'll give her first strategy review to the board on what we're doing for both the short term and the long term. And Elizabeth, maybe you want to talk about the maturation process.
Sure, absolutely. Really back in March, I rolled out our first ever global strategy. So really, what is the focus? What do we mean by diversity and valuing talent and equity and, creating fairness and inclusion with brand and culture and influence? What do those initiatives look like, both on a short-term level, but we've got to get to work, and we are already at work, I should say, building our infrastructure. So that did not exist before. As Chip said, there was we have a lack in representation, but also in the partnerships, the talent partnerships we need, the scorecard we need to hold ourselves accountable, the actual initiatives around talent development and talent management, looking at our processes and our systems to ensure equity. That's the real work that we've hit the ground running doing. This year and next year, we'll be very focused on that. And representation is really a lagging indicator. So when Chip talks about, the maturation process and/or model, for us, I embedded a diversity maturity model in our strategy so that I could talk to both leaders and to employees about the phases that we'll go through as we build this infrastructure and start to execute and really reap the rewards, hopefully, of our efforts.
Now, are you setting...
I was going to say, the only thing I would add is that I think it's important that we be impatiently patient, if that makes sense. Recognize that we are making progress, but being dissatisfied that we aren't where we need to be even at this point. And that there's, and having that hunger and that sense of urgency to addressing this quickly is really, really important. And I think employees need to see that and they need to feel that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you've set metrics when it comes to you're having a diverse slate, right? 50% of applicants for a role should be a person of color. Are you setting targets for your numbers and representation throughout your leadership and company ranks as well? Or do you have targets in place by end of the year?
The short answer is yes. And again, we're not where we need to be right now. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're very, very committed to it. And one thing I'll say about this company is when we commit to getting something done, we will get it done. But but this is not going to happen overnight. We like to promote people internally as much as we can. We've got to build more of a pipeline. One of the other great hires that we made is we've hired somebody who's going to lead all of our recruiting out of colleges and universities, and with a real focus on historically Black colleges and universities. We have an intern program. This year, our interns are about 80% diverse, which is terrific. And so it's going to take time, but we need to be impatiently patient with this.
Mm-hmm. And Elizabeth, I know you're, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to add on to that and say, one of the talking points that we have with our employees in the conversations is about several things being true at the same time. So while we have our strategy in place, our strategy is the first step. So we've got to execute on that plan and hold ourselves accountable. We've got to continue to invest in both the team, as Chip just mentioned, and in the work. And so being real about the challenges we face and the lack of infrastructure, but the absolute commitment and showing that and demonstrating that through our actions is really kind of a key part of our journey.
Are either of you concerned about possible backlash, if you will, from staff members who may feel they're focusing on this group, that group? What about me? How do you confront that?
Sure, I would love to take that one. And absolutely, we have heard from employees that are concerned about the focus right now on Black and Latinx employees. There's obviously other marginalized employees that are part of our organization. And our real focus is to go where we're most underrepresented, and that's where we are most underrepresented right now. There's also a focus on senior level women because we're unfortunately losing women as we kind of climb the ranks in the organization. But the talent practices, the strategic focus, the solutions that we are coming up with, and the actions that we are taking to increase our representation with our most underrepresented employees, those are going to make us better. Those are going to make our talent practices better and more inclusive. That is going to ensure that when we go to market, we're going to market and looking for the best talent, that we are looking internally and promoting the best talent. So over time, our efforts shouldn't be segregated or separated into this is what we're doing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is what we should be doing for our talent. This is what we should be doing for our business. And it should be holistic. I mean, in a way, I'm trying to work myself out of a job because this should be the way that we work. But of course, I hope to be with the company for a long time. Chip.
Just to build on that, I mean, this does get back to the central point, which is this is a business imperative. We're not the kind of company we have the full potential to be because we don't have the kind of diversity that we need at all levels of leadership. And as Elizabeth said, yes, it does make some people uncomfortable. I need to be the strongest ally for the Black community inside this company, for the Asian community inside this company, for the Latinx community, for the LGBTQ community. And that is an important growth opportunity for me as well. And I think getting people to understand that we're not doing this just because it's the right thing to do, the morally right thing to do. We're doing this because it's going to make us a better company fundamentally.
Mm-hmm. Chip, how much of your day are you allocating to these efforts? I know you have Elizabeth and her growing team, and they're putting in the work, but how much of your time is this now baked into every decision you're making as the CEO?
Yeah, it's hard to put a number on it because, like everything else, it kind of ebbs and flows. But I would say that most of the key decisions that I'm making, and particularly as we start thinking about talent and staffing and driving a talent agenda that really does have a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's becoming more a part of my time than it ever was in the past. It needs to be more a part of my time, just given its strategic priority and focus. So it definitely is getting a lot more attention. I also would say that, we have a relatively new chief HR officer, Tracy Laney, who joined the company literally, I think it was the first week of the lockdown when she first joined. I think she and I went maybe 9 months before we met each other face to face in person after she joined. But it's also a big part of her remit as well. And she spends a lot of her time with Elizabeth as well. And as we map out our talent program on a go forward basis, that's where we're putting a lot of our energy.
Definitely. Elizabeth, you worked previously in the media and entertainment industry. How does that experience inform how you're going about building trust and communicating with your colleagues at Levi?
Yeah. So I think my background being in strategic communications, culture, and engagement is part of it. But you know, the quality of the strategy matters, but also how we package it and the transparency and the way that we are presenting it. So bringing the energy, bringing the commitment, bringing the real passion to life, I think in a way that excites our employees and allows and supports our leaders to lean in, from ally to activist, as I like to say. I need them to take active roles in driving DE&I. It's not going to be just myself and Chip and my small team and Tracy. It's going to be our fuller HR organization. It's honestly going to be every employee at our company, from our plants and retail to our corporate office, really leaning in and figuring out how they can make a difference and help us to deliver diversity, equity, and inclusion at LS & Co.
Final question, and I'll start with you, Elizabeth. We have an esteemed global audience tuning in today. What advice would you give to the C-suite executives tuning in on their journey to create an equitable workplace? What is one thing they should do?
They've got to lean in. They've got to find out where the energy is and how they can make a difference. We need them desperately.
Chip?
Well, I think every leader needs to take a real hard look in the mirror, take a look at the numbers for their company or their organization. And, if you want to make a change, the best place to start is to declare where you are and then go from there. And, in our case, it meant declaring we had a problem and that we had a real issue, but that also creates a huge opportunity.
Oh my goodness, I could talk to you all for the next hour. Just thank you both so much. Chip Bergh and Elizabeth A. Morrison, thank you so much for your time.